Hi everyone, this is Sharon. Today's share is a journal I just completed for my latest design team project for Lydia at Raindrop Lila. And for this project, I knew I wanted to use one of my antique school primer books for my cover. And so that's what I used for this one. I tied it up with this strip of linen fabric. It's kind of a dusty blue color. And I also added a couple pieces of hardware, an old key and a piece of silverware. I'll just take those off so we can take a look at the cover. I used the front and back of this primer. It's a reading book for 5th year. And I reconstructed the spine. This is a 2-inch spine, and I use this beautiful old kind of floral fabric. I like the way it goes with the cover. I used exposed stitching for this journal. I just thought it goes well with this type and style of journal. It kind of reminds me of that old paper we used to have in grade school where we practiced our penmanship. Or maybe some music paper, I don't know, but I kind of like the idea of the exposed stitching. And then I also added this little strip of lace on the bottom just to embellish it a little bit. So there's some nice detail on the back as well as the front. I will put all the specifications for this journal in the description of this video, as well as in my Etsy shop, because this will be available for purchase. So if you are interested, I'll put a link to this where you can take a look at some of the more specifics about it. I wanted this journal to have kind of that nostalgic, warm, windy spring school day feel to it. The days where it sort of feels like summer's right around the corner, but not quite. And I wanted it to have just a nice, soft, green, florally feel to it. So for the digitals, I pulled a lot of images for my pages from Lydia's Daisy collection. It's got a lot of nice, pretty kind of springy colors to it. And then I also used quite a few images from Nature's Green Antique and French Documents, as well as her Lavender May collection. And I'll put all those links down below. And then I also pulled quite a number of aesthetic photos and pulled a number of tidbits and images from a variety of her other kits. So the inside covers are this small floral print that comes from the Daisy collection. And then for the inside of my spine, I use this fabric, linen fabric from Roxy Creations. And then on my first page, I've just got a wax seal and a little bit of lace on there to embellish. Here on this page, I used a strip of lace for my belly band. And then in there, I've got this old vintage envelope, and it had chunks kind of ripped out of it. So I relined it with this music paper just to make it whole again, and then kind of sealed the side was tore open also, so I sealed that with a piece of ledger paper. And the reason I wanted to use it, it has this beautiful deep green wax seal on there, M for Madeline. And then in there, I just tucked a little piece of waxed paper that has this beautiful floral image on it. And then you can see the music paper lining the inside. Throughout this book, I used a number of old school book pages. So there are some of these with the little birds and images on them. I just love the way they look, and they match quite well with the digitals that I chose for this journal. Here I clipped on some vintage pieces of ephemera. So I've got a ticket, I've got this tea card with the flowers on it, some old book page, and some glassine. And then this is one of Lydia's botanical images. On this page, I took a couple of pieces of vintage wallpaper for my tuck spots. And then in there, I created a couple of cards. And I just put a little bit of gold along these edges to give it sort of a corroded look. And I trimmed it up with some gold punched paper and one of Lydia's frames. And then I just backed that with some waxed straw paper, and then added the lace piece on the bottom of this one. And then on the top of this one, I've got it similar to the other one with a different image. Here I just stitched on with some decorative stitching this piece of linen, and another one of those wonderful old book pages. And then this is another one of Lydia's images. Here I created a top tuck and just added a bit of lace to the bottom of that. And then in there, I used this old library catalog card and just added a sticker and a bow on there and left some writing room on the back. This is the title page of the cover that I used for this journal, and it is dated 1897. I just adhered that to another book page with some washi tape, and that creates a nice little tuck spot in there. And then in there I just put this old piece of ephemera with some nice adding machine tape on there. In this pocket I just embellished with a little bit of old fabric and a full button. And then in there I've got this piece of journaling paper. I just added some stamps on there, some fish images, and then put this little card in there. I thought that went well with the fishing boats on the water. This is an old postcard. Here for my pages, use some of Lydia's beautiful images. I created a tuck spot by stapling on this old ticket, and then there I created a couple of journaling cards. Love the bunnies. Here in the center of this signature, I took some of Lydia's washi tape from one of her kits, and I just created these bands in there to hold these tags. So here, these I made from some flashcards, and then I just put these beautiful images on the front. On this page, I clipped on this antique French seed packet. It's an original one that I had in my collection. And then I put a piece of old ephemera on there. It's I think it's some type of a guide or a pamphlet for the Swiss Alps. Here I created a side tuck and just put some eyelets on there to attach it to the page. And then in there, I just used this image from my journaling card, did a little stenciling on the back. Here I took this piece of German scrap and used it as my corner tuck. So I just adhered it on the sides, and then in there I tucked this page from one of her document kits and added a little stenciling with paste onto the back, but left a lot of room for writing. Here I created some side tucks, and then in there I've got this nice little lammy card, added some ticking for my tab, and the base of this card is an old time card. Love the images on some of these old book pages. Here I created a belly band with this marbled paper image, and then just added a little ticking and a button on there. And hopefully you can see these background pages. Most of these are from the Daisy collection, and they're just really nice greens on those. And then here I took one of Lydia's images and just created a little card with it. And then this is an antique postcard, an image of Central Park. Here I have this beautiful lacy linen that I have. It's a larger cloth, but I've been cutting pieces of it and using it here and there. This one I used as a fabric flip and just added a little bit of lace across the top. And then there's this beautiful image underneath of the deer. Here I've got another little side tuck with this ticket, and I just put this little card in there. Here's another side tuck with another beautiful lamb image. On this page I embellished with a little bit of lace, and then over on this side of the page I attached a booklet that I made, and I just wrapped it around the page on both sides. So it's made from an old envelope. I did some stenciling on there, and then just added some papers, some writing room in the middle, and then I've got this beautiful image. This is from her Lavender May collection. And then on this page I've got this little cluster with this leather spine piece, a wax seal, and some fabrics. This side tuck is a fabric piece with some, I don't know what you call that. It's maybe some cut work or something. I'm not sure what the formal name is, but it was actually a child's bib. This was the top of it. And I just cut it across here, and I thought that made a nice little side tuck. And then in there, I've got this piece that I made. I added some buttons. And this is one of Lydia's photos. I gave it a watercolor effect when I printed it. The actual image is much clearer. It's an actual photo, but I just wanted to give it a little bit of a different look. And then I've got this one underneath as well. And then some writing room on the back. Here in the center, I've got this doily, and I just added some buttons to my strings. And then in here, in this belly band, I've got another old postcard. And then this card I created, a little bit of embossed paper on there. And then in the back, I just added a dictionary page, and you can use that as a place to tuck something. Here I created a side tuck with this little punched medallion. And then I've got another vintage envelope that I had to reinforce again because there were pieces cut out of it. But I added this little postcard image from one of Lydia's kits, probably the Lavender May kit. Tuck that in there, and then on the back I've got this image. Here I created a corner tuck with this handkerchief. Kind of double layered it, so it is actually a double tuck spot. And then in there I've got this pretty lady, and I just punched the bottom of this and attached her to this old ledger sheet, beautiful old French one. And then I've got a little journaling card in there. And then behind that I just have this vintage envelope that once had some postcards from Mobile, Alabama. Love all these soft botanicals from Lydia's kits. Here I took some coffee dyed paper and created a flip out, and then I've got a little tuck on the inside of that and edged it with a map image. And then in there I've got this tag that I made, and this bird card. I just backed that with some painter's paper, left some writing room on there. Here I clipped onto the page a couple of neat old vintage photos and some old stamps. Here I've got a fabric pocket, added a label onto that, and then in there I've got a journaling card that I made, and I just backed that with some cheesecloth and stamped it. And then I've got this vintage lotto card. And then this is one of Lydia's images. And then this is a book page on grasses. Thought that went nice with the naturey theme. And then I've got a top tuck here. Some more cute little lambs. And I just stitched those with a double row of stitching onto this wallpaper image. And then left some room for journaling on the back. Here I created this little tuck with this grass image. That came from that grass book as well. And then in there I've got this waxed love letter. And then this card that I made. Here I just clipped on another tea card. And I've got another flip out on this side with another tag and another birdie. And then on this last page, I just taped down this image with a little bit of some fabric tape. And that is our journal. I hope you enjoyed that flip through today. I thank you very much for coming along with me. And until next time, bye-bye.